Lady, you're making my customers uncomfortable. Annabeth Wilson's fingers tightened around the neck of her battered guitar, but she didn't stop singing. Her voice, raw and weathered like broken glass wrapped in velvet, continued to pour out the melody that had once made stadiums weep. Now it echoed off the grimy walls of the subway station while commuters hurried past, their faces twisted in disgust or pity. I said move along, the coffee shop manager repeated, stepping closer. His pristine uniform and judgmental scowl made him look like every gatekeeper who'd ever tried to silence her. This is private property. Annabeth's eyes never left the worn fretboard of her guitar, but her voice grew stronger, defiant. The song was Aretha Franklin's Respect, though few people would recognize it coming from a woman whose clothes hadn't been washed in weeks, whose hair was matted beneath a knitted cap that had seen better decades. RESPCT, find out what it means to me. A teenager in designer sneakers laughed, pulling out his phone. Oh my God, listen to this crazy lady trying to sing. This is going on TikTok. Tyler, don't, his girlfriend whispered, but she was already giggling behind her manicured hand. More phones appeared, a small crowd gathering not to listen but to mock. They filmed her torn coat, her mismatched gloves, the cardboard sign propped against her guitar case that read, "Music heals all wounds," in careful handwriting. She thinks she's Whitney Houston, someone called out. More like Whitney Houston's ghost, another voice added, sparking more laughter. Annabeth's fingers found a chord that made the laughter die in their throats. For just a moment, something transcendent happened, her voice soared above the concrete and fluorescent lights, touching something ancient and sacred that most people had forgotten existed. In that instant, she wasn't a homeless woman begging for change. She was pure music, pure soul, pure power. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, caught between their prejudice and the undeniable beauty of what they were hearing. That's actually... The girlfriend started, then caught herself. I mean, it's still weird. But Tyler kept filming, his expression changing from mockery to something else, recognition dancing at the edges of his consciousness, a melody that seemed familiar but impossible to place. Behind the small crowd, unnoticed by everyone including Annabeth, stood a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and intelligent eyes. Dr. Davina Patel clutched her briefcase tighter, her breath catching as she listened to the voice that had haunted her dreams for 15 years. It can't be, Davina thought, her professional composure cracking. She's supposed to be dead. Hey, my friend, hope you're doing well, drop a comment and let me know how you're feeling about this story so far and where you are watching from. Some stories are too close to my heart to share on YouTube. I send those, along with little life lessons and surprises, to my email circle. If you'd like to be part of it, you can join with the link in the description, Annabeth finished the song, her voice trailing off into the mechanical hum of the subway system. A few coins clinked into her guitar case, pity money from people who wanted to ease their conscience without acknowledging what they'd witnessed. Show's over, the coffee shop manager said, his authority restored now that the magic had ended. Move it along, or I'm calling security. Annabeth slowly packed her guitar, her movements careful and deliberate. She'd learned not to react to the cruelty, not to let them see how their words cut deeper than the winter wind that would be her companion again tonight. But as she stood, her knitted cap slipped, and for just a moment, the harsh fluorescent light caught the elegant bone structure of her face, the regal bearing that no amount of hardship could completely erase. Davina gasped audibly, taking an involuntary step forward. Excuse me, Davina called out, her voice trembling. But Annabeth was already walking away, guitar case slung over her shoulder, disappearing into the tunnel that led to the deeper, darker parts of the subway system where people like her could rest without being moved along. Davina started to follow, then stopped. 15 years of guilt and regret warred with the impossibility of what she'd just witnessed. The woman she'd been looking at, the voice she'd been hearing, it belonged to someone the world believed was dead. Someone Davina had helped destroy. Tyler uploaded his video that night with the caption, "Homeless lady thinks she's a singer LOL #subway crazy #delusional." He tagged it with trending hashtags and went to sleep, expecting maybe a few hundred views and some laughs from his friends. He woke up to 17 million views and counting. But the comments weren't what he'd expected. Instead of mockery, people were asking questions. Serious questions. Who is this woman? Her voice is incredible. This isn't funny. This is heartbreaking. Someone with that much talent shouldn't be living on the streets. She reminds me of someone. I can't place it, but that voice. OMG, wait. Play this at 1.25 speed and tell me it doesn't sound like. And then, buried in the thousands of comments, one that made Tyler's blood run cold. That's not just any homeless woman. That's Annabeth Williamson. She was supposed to be the next Aretha Franklin. What the hell happened to her? Within hours, the entertainment blogs picked up the story. Music journalists who hadn't thought about Annabeth Williamson in over a decade suddenly found themselves digging through old archives, piecing together the mystery of the rising star who had vanished at the height of her career. The woman who had been scheduled to perform at the Grammy Awards 15 years ago. The woman who had simply disappeared one day, leaving behind a recording contract worth millions and questions that had never been answered. The woman the music industry had quietly written off as another cautionary tale about fame and addiction, even though no one had ever found a body. Davina Patel watched the story explode across social media from her office at Columbia Medical Center, her hands shaking as she read comment after comment from people demanding to know what had happened to Annabeth Williamson. Davina knew exactly what had happened. She had been there. She had been the doctor who'd signed the commitment papers that had sent Annabeth to Riverside Psychiatric Hospital for what was supposed to be a 30-day evaluation. Annabeth had never come out. The official story was that she died by suicide 3 weeks into her stay, her body lost in the Hudson River, no remains ever recovered. The media had accepted it, the public had mourned briefly, and the music industry had moved on to the next promising star. But Davina had always known the truth was more complicated. The Annabeth she'd evaluated hadn't been suicidal, she'd been angry, betrayed, and absolutely convinced that powerful people were trying to destroy her career. Davina had dismissed it as paranoid delusions brought on by the pressure of fame. Now, 15 years later, watching that same woman sing with a voice that could still move mountains, Davina realized that maybe Annabeth hadn't been delusional at all. Maybe she had been right. And maybe Davina had been the unwitting instrument of a conspiracy that had stolen the world's greatest voice and left it to die in the shadows of a subway tunnel. As the video continued to spread and the questions grew louder, Davina picked up her phone with trembling fingers. She had a choice to make: stay silent and let the world continue believing that Annabeth Williamson was dead, or step forward and admit that she'd been part of whatever had destroyed a legend. But first, she had to find Annabeth before the media circus did. Because if Davina was right about what had really happened 15 years ago, then Annabeth's life was about to be in danger all over again. The same people who had wanted her silenced once wouldn't hesitate to finish the job. And this time, they wouldn't leave anything to chance. 3 hours after Tyler's video hit 25 million views, Annabeth Williamson sat in the basement of St. Matthew's Episcopal Church, carefully tuning the guitar that had been her only constant companion for 15 years. The space served as an unofficial homeless shelter during the coldest months, filled with people society had forgotten or deliberately discarded. "Annabeth, you got any new songs tonight?" called out Jerome, a Vietnam veteran whose scarred hands trembled from decades of trying to forget what he'd seen in the jungle. "That Aretha song you did earlier gave me chills." Annabeth smiled, the first genuine smile she'd worn all day. Here, among the invisible people, she could still be herself. "How about some Nina Simone?" "Oh, honey," said Dolores, a woman in her 60s who'd lost her teaching job and her home in the same devastating month. You know Nina Simone like you know your own heartbeat. Annabeth began to play, feeling good, her voice filling the cramped basement with the kind of raw emotion that made people stop breathing. But as she sang, her mind drifted to another basement, another time when music had been her salvation and her curse. 15 years ago, she'd been Annabeth Williamson, the girl from rural Georgia whose voice had been discovered in a church basement not unlike this one. Marcus Chen, the record executive who'd found her, had promised to make her the biggest star since Aretha Franklin. He'd kept that promise, for exactly 18 months. It's the voice of a generation, Marcus had told reporters when Annabeth's debut album went triple platinum. She's going to change everything. But Annabeth had learned that in the music industry, changing everything meant threatening someone's empire. And Vincent Carmichael's empire had been built on controlling exactly which voices the world got to hear. Vincent Carmichael, the media mogul who owned 3 record labels, 4 radio networks, and a congressional representative's worth of political influence. The man who decided which artists lived or died in the court of public opinion. The man who'd made it clear that Annabeth's success was disrupting carefully laid plans. "You're too independent," Vincent had told her during their last meeting, his voice as cold as his steel-gray eyes. "Too political. Too difficult to control." Annabeth had refused to change her music, refused to soften her message about social justice and racial equality. She'd thought her talent was protection enough. She'd been wrong. The first sign of trouble came when radio stations suddenly stopped playing her songs. Her manager, Sandra Klein, had assured her it was temporary, a contract dispute that would be resolved soon. Then the concert venues started canceling. Technical problems, they said. Scheduling conflicts. Insurance issues. Finally, the rumors began. Annabeth was difficult to work with. Demanding. Unstable. Using drugs. Having a breakdown. None of it was true, but truth had never mattered in the entertainment industry. "Annabeth, you okay?" Dolores's voice brought her back to the present. She'd stopped playing without realizing it, her hands frozen on the guitar strings. "Just thinking about old songs," Annabeth said quietly. But Jerome was staring at her with an expression she'd learned to fear, recognition dawning in his eyes like sunrise after a long, dark night. "Lord have mercy," Jerome whispered. "I know who you are." Annabeth's chest tightened with panic. For 15 years, she'd lived in the shadows, invisible to everyone except the other forgotten souls who shared her exile. The viral video had changed that. Soon, everyone would be looking for her. "Jerome, please. You're that singer. The one who disappeared." Jerome's voice was filled with awe and heartbreak. "Girl, what happened to you?" Before Annabeth could answer, footsteps echoed down the basement stairs. Father Miguel, the priest who allowed them to shelter here, appeared with a woman Annabeth didn't recognize, middle-aged, well-dressed, with silver-streaked hair and eyes full of guilt. "Annabeth," Father Miguel said gently, "this lady says she knows you. Says her name is Dr. Davina Patel." Annabeth's blood turned to ice. She knew that name. Dr. Davina Patel was the psychiatrist who'd evaluated her 15 years ago, the woman who'd signed the papers that had sent her to Riverside Psychiatric Hospital. The woman who'd been part of destroying her life. "Hello, Annabeth," Davina said quietly, her voice trembling with emotion. "I've been looking for you for a very long time." The basement fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of traffic above. Annabeth gripped her guitar like a shield, every muscle in her body coiled for flight. "I don't have anything to say to you," Annabeth said, her voice steady despite the fear racing through her veins. "I know. I know you have every reason to hate me." Davina took a careful step closer. But Annabeth, you're in danger. The video is everywhere. People are asking questions. The same people who wanted you silenced before, they're going to come looking for you. Let them come, Annabeth said fiercely. I'm not running anymore. You don't understand. Vincent Carmichael is still alive. Still powerful. And he spent 15 years believing you were dead. Davina's voice cracked with urgency. When he finds out you survived, he'll finish what he started, Annabeth finished. I know exactly who Vincent Carmichael is and what he's capable of. Jerome stood up slowly, his soldier's instincts recognizing the tension in the room. Annabeth, who is this Vincent person? He's the man who destroyed my career because I wouldn't be his puppet, Annabeth said, never taking her eyes off Davina. He's the man who had me committed to a psychiatric hospital for 30 days of evaluation that turned into 3 years of hell. Davina's face went pale. 3 years? But the record said, they told me you died after 3 weeks. They told you what they wanted you to believe. Annabeth's voice was bitter as winter wind. Just like they told the world I committed suicide. Just like they told my family I'd overdosed and my body was lost in the river. My God, Davina whispered. What did they do to you? Annabeth stood slowly, her guitar still clutched against her chest. They tried to break my mind. Electroshock therapy. Experimental drugs. Isolation. They wanted me to forget who I was, forget my music, forget everything that made me a threat to Vincent's empire. The basement was completely silent now, everyone hanging on Annabeth's words. For 3 years, I fought them. Every day, I sang to myself in that hospital room, keeping my voice alive even when they tried to drug it out of me. Annabeth's eyes blazed with the fire that had once commanded stadium crowds. They said I was delusional. Paranoid. Dangerous. How did you get out? Dolores asked softly. I didn't get out. I escaped. Annabeth smiled grimly. During a transfer to another facility. I ran, and I've been running ever since. Davina was crying now, tears streaming down her face. Annabeth, I swear to you, I didn't know. When I evaluated you, I thought you were having a breakdown. The things you were saying about conspiracy and people trying to destroy you, they seemed like paranoid delusions. Because that's what Vincent wanted you to think. He had my medical records altered, had fake witnesses prepared, had evidence planted. Annabeth's voice was steady but filled with pain. You were just another tool in his plan, Doctor. Another way to make my mental illness seem official. I've spent 15 years wondering if I made the right decision, Davina said desperately. 15 years knowing something felt wrong about your case. Well, now you know, Annabeth said coldly. You helped them bury me alive. But before Davina could respond, her phone buzzed with an urgent notification. She glanced at it, and her face went white with terror. Annabeth, we need to leave. Now. What? Vincent Carmichael just released a statement to the press. He's claiming that the woman in the viral video is an imposter, someone pretending to be Annabeth Williamson for attention. Davina's hands shook as she read from her phone. He's offering $1 million reward for information leading to the arrest of this disturbed individual who's dishonoring the memory of a beloved artist. Annabeth felt the walls closing in around her. Vincent had just painted a target on her back and made it profitable for anyone to turn her in. There's more, Davina continued, her voice barely audible. He's also announced that he's donating $10 million to mental health services, in memory of Annabeth Williamson, whose tragic death reminds us all of the importance of seeking help for mental illness. The cruel genius of it hit Annabeth like a physical blow. Vincent wasn't just denying her identity, he was using her supposed death to build his own reputation as a philanthropist. Anyone who tried to support her would look like they were attacking a man who donated millions to help the mentally ill. He's already won, Annabeth said hollowly. Even from the grave, he's found a way to make me the villain. No, Jerome said firmly, standing up with the bearing of a man who'd survived worse battles. He's scared. You don't offer $1 million bounty for someone who can't hurt you. Father Miguel stepped forward. Annabeth, you can stay here as long as you need to. This is sanctuary. But even as he spoke, they could hear commotion upstairs, voices, footsteps, the sound of people searching. Father Miguel, a voice called from above. This is Detective Sarah Morrison with the NYPD. We've received reports that a person of interest in a fraud investigation is on these premises. Annabeth's chest tightened. Vincent had moved faster than she'd expected, already mobilizing law enforcement to treat her as a criminal rather than a victim. What do we do? Dolores whispered. Davina looked directly at Annabeth, and for the first time, there was steel in her voice. We fight back. I may not be able to undo what I did 15 years ago, but I can help you prove who you really are. Why would you do that? Annabeth asked. You don't owe me anything. Yes, I do. I owe you the truth. Davina pulled out her phone. I kept copies of all my evaluation notes from your case. The real ones, not the altered versions that went into the official file. I've been carrying your file for 15 years, waiting for a chance to make this right. Annabeth stared at the woman who'd been part of her destruction, seeing something she hadn't expected, genuine remorse and determination to make amends. But before she could respond, the basement door opened, and Detective Morrison appeared at the top of the stairs, her hand resting on her service weapon. Dr. Patel? Detective Morrison called out. We were told you might be here. We need to speak with you about a woman claiming to be a deceased recording artist. Davina looked at Annabeth, and in that moment, both women understood that everything that happened next would determine not just Annabeth's future, but whether the truth about Vincent Carmichael's conspiracy would ever see light. Detective Morrison, Davina said, her voice steady and professional, I'm Dr. Davina Patel, and I have information about this case that you need to hear. As Detective Morrison descended the stairs, Annabeth realized that her 15 years of hiding were over. For better or worse, the world was about to learn what had really happened to Annabeth Williamson. But Vincent Carmichael had spent those same 15 years consolidating his power, building his reputation, and perfecting his ability to destroy anyone who threatened him. The war for Annabeth's identity, and her life, was just beginning. And this time, she wouldn't be fighting alone. But as Detective Morrison's eyes swept the basement and landed on Annabeth with suspicious recognition, Annabeth realized that Davina's sudden appearance might not be the rescue it seemed. After all, 15 years was a long time for someone to plan the perfect betrayal. And Dr. Davina Patel had just led the police directly to the woman Vincent Carmichael wanted to disappear forever. Detective Sarah Morrison descended the basement stairs with the measured pace of someone who'd learned that rushing into volatile situations usually made them worse. Her dark eyes swept the room, cataloging the homeless individuals, the priest, the well-dressed doctor, and finally settling on the woman holding the guitar. Ms. Wilson, Detective Morrison said, her voice professionally neutral. I'm going to need you to come with me for questioning. Annabeth's grip tightened on her guitar. What are the charges? Identity fraud. Impersonation. Potentially extortion, depending on whether you're planning to profit from this performance. Detective Morrison pulled out her handcuffs. The complaint was filed by Carmichael Media Group. They have documentation proving that Annabeth Williamson died 15 years ago. Because they wanted everyone to believe that, Davina said firmly, stepping between Annabeth and the detective. Detective Morrison, I'm Dr. Davina Patel, and I have evidence that directly contradicts those claims. Detective Morrison paused, her expression shifting slightly. Dr. Patel. You're the psychiatrist who evaluated the real Annabeth Williamson before her death. I'm the psychiatrist who was manipulated into committing an innocent woman to a psychiatric facility, Davina corrected. And I have proof. Annabeth watched the exchange with growing suspicion. Something felt orchestrated about this confrontation, too neat, too convenient. Davina's sudden appearance after 15 years, her claim to have kept secret files, her perfect timing in showing up just as the video went viral, it all felt like another performance in Vincent Carmichael's theater of lies. "Show me this proof," Detective Morrison said. Davina pulled out her phone and opened a secure file app. "I have the original psychiatric evaluation notes from Annabeth's case. Notes that were never included in the official file because they didn't support the predetermined diagnosis." She handed the phone to Detective Morrison, who read silently for several long minutes. As she read, her expression changed from skepticism to confusion to something approaching alarm. "According to these notes, you recommended outpatient therapy, not institutional commitment," Detective Morrison said slowly. "That's correct." Annabeth was stressed, angry, and feeling persecuted, but she showed no signs of psychosis or suicidal ideation. Davina's voice was steady, but Annabeth noticed her hands trembling. "Someone altered my official report after I submitted it." "Dr. Patel," Annabeth said quietly, "why didn't you come forward 15 years ago when you found out your report had been changed?" Davina's composure cracked slightly. "Because I was scared. Vincent Carmichael had just destroyed the career of one of the most talented artists in the world. What do you think he would have done to a psychiatrist who tried to expose him? So you waited 15 years? Annabeth's voice was sharp with accusation. "You let me rot in that hospital for 3 years, let the world believe I was dead, let my family mourn me, because you were scared." "I tried," Davina said desperately. 6 months after you supposedly died, I contacted the FBI. I told them I had evidence of medical fraud in your case." Detective Morrison looked up sharply. "What happened?" "Agent Michael Torres took my statement. Said they would investigate. 2 weeks later, I was informed that the case had been closed due to lack of evidence." Davina's voice grew bitter. 3 months after that, Agent Torres died in a car accident. The basement fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Annabeth felt ice forming in her veins as the implications settled in. Vincent had a federal agent killed? Jerome whispered. "I don't know," Davina admitted. "But after Torres died, I received a visit from 2 men who strongly encouraged me to focus on my medical practice and forget about Annabeth Williamson. They were very persuasive." Detective Morrison closed the phone and handed it back to Davina. "Dr. Patel, if what you're saying is true, we're talking about conspiracy, kidnapping, possibly murder. Why come forward now?" "Because I've been monitoring Annabeth's case for 15 years. Waiting for evidence that she was still alive." Davina looked directly at Annabeth. 3 years ago, I hired a private investigator to search for any trace of you. Last year, he found a homeless woman in Philadelphia whose description matched yours. By the time I got there, you'd moved on." Annabeth's suspicion crystallized into certainty. "You've been hunting me. I've been trying to find you to make this right. How do I know this isn't just another setup? Another way for Vincent to make sure I disappear permanently this time?" Before Davina could answer, her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and went pale. "It's Vincent Carmichael," she whispered. The basement erupted in whispered conversations, but Annabeth held up her hand for silence. "Answer it. Put it on speaker." Davina's hands shook as she accepted the call and activated the speaker function. "Dr. Patel," Vincent's voice filled the basement, smooth, cultured, and absolutely cold. "I understand you've been having conversations about ancient history." "Vincent," Davina said carefully. I thought we'd reached an understanding 15 years ago about the importance of letting sleeping dogs lie. Annabeth Williamson is dead, Doctor. She died tragically in that hospital, and bringing up painful memories serves no one. Annabeth gestured for Davina to keep him talking. The woman in the video isn't Annabeth, Davina said. Of course she isn't. Annabeth was a beautiful, talented young woman with her whole life ahead of her. This homeless woman is clearly mentally ill, probably delusional, certainly dangerous. Vincent's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. I'm sure Detective Morrison agrees that the kindest thing would be to get this disturbed individual the help she needs. Detective Morrison's eyes narrowed. How did Vincent Carmichael know she was here? Vincent, Davina continued, what if I told you I had evidence that Annabeth's death was fabricated? The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several heartbeats. When Vincent spoke again, his voice had lost all pretense of warmth. I would say that 15 years of guilt have affected your judgment, Doctor. I would also remind you that making false accusations against respected members of the entertainment industry could be considered defamation. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Additionally, I might wonder whether your medical license should be reviewed, given your apparent inability to recognize clear signs of mental illness. Annabeth had heard enough. She moved closer to the phone. Hello, Vincent. The silence that followed was profound and terrible. When Vincent finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. That's impossible. You sound like you've seen a ghost, Annabeth said, her voice carrying all the power and presence that had once filled concert halls. Tell me, Vincent, how exactly does it feel to have your past come back to haunt you? You're dead, Vincent said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Disappointed? I know you worked very hard to make that happen. Detective Morrison was recording the conversation on her own phone, her expression growing darker with each exchange. I don't know who you are, Vincent said, recovering his composure, but impersonating a deceased person is a serious crime. I'll make sure you're prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Go ahead, Annabeth replied. I'm looking forward to my day in court. Especially the part where I get to testify about what really happened to Annabeth Williamson. No one will believe you. You're a homeless, mentally ill woman with delusions of grandeur. I'm Vincent Carmichael. Yes, you are. And I'm about to remind the world exactly what that means. Annabeth ended the call and handed the phone back to Davina. The basement was completely silent. Detective Morrison, Annabeth said quietly, that man just admitted to knowing details about my supposed death that weren't public knowledge. He also knew you were here before you identified yourself to him. Detective Morrison's expression was grim. Mr. Carmichael also just threatened a witness and attempted to intimidate a law enforcement officer. So what happens now? Father Miguel asked. Before Detective Morrison could answer, her radio crackled to life. All units, we have reports of armed men surrounding St. Matthew's Episcopal Church. Possible hostage situation in progress. Detective Morrison's blood ran cold. There are no hostages here. Annabeth understood immediately. Vincent's cleaning house. He can't afford to let any of us walk away from this conversation. Through the basement windows, they could see shadows moving outside, figures in dark clothing taking positions around the church. How many exits does this building have? Detective Morrison asked Father Miguel. 3. Front door, side door through the rectory, and the old coal tunnel that leads to the building next door. We need to get everyone out of here, Detective Morrison said, already calling for backup. This has escalated beyond a simple fraud investigation. But Annabeth was staring at Davina with new understanding. You recorded that phone call, didn't you? That's why you really came here. Not to make amends, but to get Vincent to incriminate himself on tape. Davina met her gaze steadily. I've been planning this for 3 years. Ever since I found evidence that you were still alive. You used me as bait. I gave you a weapon, Davina corrected. Vincent Carmichael just confessed to orchestrating your disappearance. That recording will destroy him. Only if we live long enough to use it, Jerome said grimly, peering out the window. And those boys outside don't look like they're planning to take prisoners. Annabeth looked around the basement at the people who'd become her family, Jerome, Dolores, Father Miguel, and the other forgotten souls who'd sheltered here. They were in danger because of her, because Vincent's past was finally catching up with him. There's another way, Annabeth said quietly. What do you mean? Detective Morrison asked. Annabeth picked up her guitar, her fingers finding the familiar chords that had once commanded audiences of thousands. I mean, it's time for Annabeth Williamson to give her comeback performance. Annabeth, that's suicide, Davina protested. No, Annabeth replied, her voice filled with the power that had been forged in pain and refined by 15 years of survival. That's justice. She started up the stairs toward the main sanctuary, her voice rising in a song that would either be her salvation or her funeral dirge. But this time, she wouldn't be singing alone. Annabeth's footsteps echoed through the empty sanctuary as she climbed the stairs from the basement, her guitar case over her shoulder and 15 years of suppressed rage burning in her chest. Behind her, she could hear Detective Morrison arguing with Davina about protocol and jurisdiction, but their voices faded as she approached the church's main doors. Through the stained glass windows, she could see the shapes of armed men positioning themselves around the building. Vincent had moved fast, too fast for this to be improvised. He'd been planning for this possibility, probably for years. Annabeth, don't do this, Davina called from the stairwell. If you go out there, he wins. Annabeth paused at the altar, her fingers trailing across the worn wood where thousands of people had knelt seeking forgiveness. Dr. Patel, Vincent won the day you signed those commitment papers. Everything since then has just been him covering his tracks. That's not true. You survived. You kept your voice, your spirit, your music. That's not losing, that's the kind of victory he can't destroy. Annabeth turned to face the woman who'd been both her destroyer and, possibly, her salvation. Davina stood in the sanctuary doorway, her silver hair catching the light from the candles Father Miguel kept burning for lost souls. You don't understand, Annabeth said quietly. I didn't just survive in that hospital. I learned things. About Vincent, about the people he works with, about how deep this conspiracy goes. What kind of things? I wasn't the first artist he had committed. There were others, singers, musicians, songwriters who'd gotten too big, too independent, too dangerous to his empire. Annabeth's voice carried the weight of terrible knowledge. Some of them didn't make it out alive. Davina's face went pale. Annabeth, if you have evidence of murder. I have evidence of everything. Names, dates, methods. 3 years in that place, and I kept my eyes open, my mind sharp. Annabeth smiled grimly. Vincent thought he was breaking me. Instead, he was giving me a front-row seat to his operation. Before Davina could respond, Annabeth's phone, a burner she'd bought with busking money, buzzed with an incoming call. The number was blocked, but she answered anyway. I wondered when you'd call me directly, Annabeth said. You should have stayed dead. Vincent's voice was ice-cold fury barely held in check. Do you have any idea what you've cost me today? The stock prices, the media attention, the questions from the board. I hope it's everything. It's nothing compared to what I'll cost you if you don't walk out of that church and disappear forever. Vincent's voice dropped to a whisper. I have 12 men surrounding that building, Annabeth. Good men, professionals, very well paid. One word from me, and everyone inside becomes collateral damage in a terrorist incident. You'd kill a priest? A police detective? Innocent homeless people? I'd kill 100 innocent people to keep my secrets buried. You of all people should know that by now. Annabeth looked at Davina, who was listening with growing horror. What do you want? I want you to walk out the front door, get in the car that's waiting, and this time I'll make sure you stay dead. In exchange, everyone else walks away. And if I refuse? Then in 30 minutes, this becomes a hostage situation that ends tragically. The homeless woman who thought she was Annabeth Williamson will be remembered as a disturbed individual who took innocent people hostage before being killed by police. Annabeth felt the trap closing around her. Vincent had orchestrated this perfectly. She could sacrifice herself to save the others, or she could fight and watch innocent people die for her past. I need 10 minutes to think about it. You have 5. The line went dead. Annabeth stared at her phone, seeing her own reflection in the black screen. 15 years ago, she'd been a young woman with unlimited potential and naive faith in justice. Now she was a survivor who'd learned that sometimes the only choice was between different kinds of defeat. Annabeth, Davina said quietly, there's something I need to tell you. If you're going to confess that this is all another setup, save your breath. I already figured that out. It's not a setup. But it's not what you think either. Davina pulled out her phone and showed Annabeth a video call interface. I've been broadcasting this entire conversation live to the FBI's cybercrime division. Annabeth stared at the screen, seeing her own image reflected back alongside Davina's. You've been recording everything. Agent Torres wasn't the only federal investigator interested in Vincent Carmichael. After he died, his partner, Agent Lisa Chen, took over the case. She's been building evidence against Vincent for 15 years, waiting for the right moment to move. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed your reactions to be genuine. Vincent is too smart to incriminate himself unless he believes he's in complete control. Davina's eyes were fierce with determination. Annabeth, everything he just said, the threats, the admission that he's had other artists killed, it's all been recorded and transmitted to federal investigators. Through the windows, Annabeth could see more vehicles arriving, not Vincent's people, but FBI tactical units taking positions around the church. Agent Chen. Davina spoke to her phone. Did you get all of that? A woman's voice came through the speaker, professional but urgent. We got everything, Dr. Patel. Ms. Williamson, this is Agent Lisa Chen. We've been waiting 15 years to hear Vincent Carmichael incriminate himself this thoroughly. What happens now? Annabeth asked. Now we finish what my partner started. Vincent's men are already in federal custody. We've been tracking their movements since they left Carmichael Tower. Vincent himself is being arrested as we speak. Annabeth felt something unfamiliar rising in her chest, hope mixed with disbelief. It's over. The immediate threat is over. But Annabeth, we're going to need your testimony about what happened in Riverside Psychiatric Hospital. The evidence you mentioned, names, dates, methods, that could help us prosecute not just Vincent, but an entire network of people who've been silencing artists for decades. Annabeth looked at Davina, understanding dawning. You've been working with the FBI this whole time. For 3 years. Ever since my private investigator found evidence that you were alive. Davina's voice was soft but steady. Annabeth, I made a terrible mistake 15 years ago. I've spent every day since then trying to find a way to make it right. By using me as bait for a federal investigation. By giving you the chance to take down the man who destroyed your life. Annabeth was quiet for a long moment, processing the complexity of what had just happened. Davina had manipulated her, yes, but the manipulation had been designed to restore her voice, not silence it further. Dr. Patel, Annabeth said finally, "Why should I trust you now?" "Because," Davina replied, stepping closer, "I'm about to risk everything I have to make sure you get justice." "What do you mean?" Davina pulled out a thick manila folder from her briefcase. "These are copies of all the original medical records from Riverside Psychiatric Hospital. Not just yours, every patient who was committed under suspicious circumstances over the past 20 years. I've been gathering evidence for years, waiting for the right moment." Annabeth opened the folder, seeing page after page of documentation, admission forms, medication logs, treatment notes, death certificates. Names she recognized, artists who disappeared or died under mysterious circumstances. "How did you get these?" Dr. Harrison Webb was the chief psychiatrist at Riverside. He kept meticulous records, including notes about patients he suspected were being held illegally. Davina's voice grew sad. "Dr. Webb died 2 years ago, but not before he gave me these files. He'd been carrying the guilt of what happened at that hospital for decades." Annabeth read through the documents, seeing the scope of Vincent's operation laid bare. Dozens of artists, writers, and musicians who'd become inconvenient to powerful people. Some had been drugged into compliance, others had been driven to actual mental breakdown, still others had simply disappeared. "This is a mass grave," Annabeth whispered. "It's evidence that's going to put Vincent Carmichael and his associates away for life." Agent Chen's voice came through the phone again. "Ms. Williamson, we have Vincent in custody, but he's demanding to speak with you." "Why?" "He claims he has information about your family that you'll want to hear." Annabeth's blood turned cold. She'd lost contact with her family when she'd been committed, they'd been told she was dead, had held a funeral, had mourned and moved on. The thought that Vincent might have threatened them, might still be threatening them, made her chest tighten with fear. "Put him on," Annabeth said. Vincent's voice filled the sanctuary, no longer smooth and controlled but ragged with desperation. "Annabeth, you think you've won, but you have no idea what you've started. I've started the truth, Vincent. Something you've been running from for 15 years. The truth? The truth is that your little sister is a sophomore at Georgia State University. Pre-med, wants to be a pediatric surgeon. Beautiful girl, very talented, reminds me a lot of you at that age." Annabeth's hand went to her throat. "If you touch Melody, I don't have to touch her. I just have to make a phone call to certain people who handle student loans. Academic fraud is such a serious charge, especially for pre-med students. One accusation, even false, could destroy her entire future." The threat hit Annabeth like a physical blow. Vincent was telling her that even from federal custody, he could still reach her family, still punish them for her defiance. "What do you want?" "I want you to recant everything. Tell the FBI this was all a mistake, that you really are just a mentally ill homeless woman with delusions. Walk away from this, and your sister gets to become the doctor she dreams of being." Annabeth looked at the medical files in her hands, evidence that could save dozens of other families from what hers had endured. Then she thought about Melody, her little sister who'd been only 10 years old when Annabeth had disappeared, who'd grown up believing her big sister was dead. "Annabeth," Davina said quietly, "he's bluffing. The FBI can protect your family. Can they protect her for the rest of her life? Can they guarantee that Vincent's network won't find a way to hurt her years from now?" Annabeth's voice was hollow with despair. "He's right. Even if we put him in prison, his empire doesn't die with him. So what are you going to do?" Agent Chen asked through the phone. Annabeth closed the medical files and looked around the sanctuary, at the altar where she'd sung her heart out for the forgotten people of the world, at the windows that had shown her both her past and her future, at Davina who had risked everything to give her this chance for justice. "I'm going to do what I should have done 15 years ago," Annabeth said quietly. She picked up her guitar and walked to the center of the sanctuary, where the acoustics were perfect, where her voice would carry the farthest. "Annabeth, what are you doing?" Davina asked. "I'm going to sing," Annabeth replied, her fingers finding the opening chords of a song she'd written in the depths of Riverside Psychiatric Hospital, during the darkest hours when she'd thought she might never see daylight again. "Vincent can threaten my family, he can destroy my life, he can even kill me. But there's one thing he can never touch, the truth that comes through music." As Annabeth began to sing, her voice filling the sanctuary with pain and power and unbreakable hope, Davina realized that this woman wasn't just surviving anymore. She was transforming her suffering into something that could heal the world. And somewhere in federal custody, Vincent Carmichael was listening to the voice he tried to silence forever, understanding that his 15-year war against Annabeth Williamson was finally, inevitably, coming to an end. But the cost of victory was about to become clear to everyone. Because Annabeth's song wasn't just a performance. It was a confession that would destroy her family's safety forever. Annabeth's voice filled the sanctuary with the haunting melody she'd composed in the darkest hours at Riverside, a song about hope surviving in places where light never reached. As she sang, her eyes closed, she felt something she hadn't experienced in 15 years, the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she was meant to do. When the last note faded, the silence was profound and sacred. "That was beautiful," Davina said softly, and Annabeth heard something new in her voice, not just admiration, but tenderness that made her chest tighten with unexpected warmth. "Annabeth," Agent Chen's voice came through the phone, "that was incredible. But we need to move quickly. Vincent's lawyers are already trying to get him released on bail." "How is that possible?" Annabeth asked. "You recorded him threatening to kill innocent people. His legal team is claiming the recordings were obtained illegally, that we entrapped him into making statements under duress. They're very good at what they do." Davina moved closer to Annabeth, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Agent Chen, what about the medical records? The evidence from Riverside? That's going to take time to authenticate. Vincent's people are claiming the documents are forgeries." Annabeth felt the familiar weight of defeat settling on her chest. Even with federal investigators involved, even with recorded confessions, Vincent was still finding ways to slip through the legal system he'd spent decades learning to manipulate. "There's something else," Agent Chen continued, her voice growing grim. "We've lost contact with the surveillance team watching your sister." Annabeth's blood turned to ice. "What do you mean, lost contact?" "The agents assigned to protect Melody went dark 20 minutes ago. We're sending a backup team to Georgia State, but Vincent's people got to her first," Annabeth finished, her voice hollow with despair. Davina's hand found Annabeth's, warm and steady. "Annabeth, we'll find her. I promise you, we'll find her." Annabeth looked at Davina, really looked at her for the first time since this nightmare had begun. Silver-streaked hair framing a face marked by years of guilt and determination. Eyes that held intelligence and compassion and something deeper that Annabeth was only beginning to recognize. "Why?" Annabeth asked quietly. "Why risk everything for someone you barely know?" "Because 15 years ago, I helped destroy the most beautiful voice I'd ever heard. Because I've spent every day since then knowing I'd been used as a weapon against an innocent woman." Davina's voice was barely a whisper. "Because when I listened to you sing just now, I remembered what it felt like to believe in something pure and good." Annabeth felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest, not just gratitude, but attraction complicated by shared trauma and desperate circumstances. Davina had been part of her destruction, but she was also risking her career, her safety, her life to make it right. "Agent Chen," Annabeth said, "I need to know something. How long have you really been investigating Vincent Carmichael?" 15 years. Ever since my partner Michael Torres was killed." "And how long have you been working with Dr. Patel?" There was a pause that lasted too long. Annabeth, why are you asking? Because something doesn't add up. Vincent's people moved too fast, knew too much about our location, our plans. Annabeth's voice grew cold with suspicion. Someone told them we were here. Annabeth, what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that this entire operation feels orchestrated. The viral video, Davina finding me at exactly the right moment, Vincent's people surrounding the church just as we get him on tape, it's all too convenient. Davina's hand tightened on Annabeth's. Annabeth, you're in shock. You're looking for patterns that aren't there. Am I? Annabeth pulled her hand away and stepped back. Tell me, Dr. Patel, how did you know I was performing in that specific subway station at that exact time? I told you, I've been searching for you for 3 years. That's not an answer. How did you know I would be there tonight? Davina's expression flickered, just for a moment, but Annabeth caught it. Guilt, calculation, something that looked almost like relief. Annabeth, Agent Chen's voice came through the phone, urgency replacing the earlier professional calm, you need to get out of that church. Now. Why? Because we just ran background checks on everyone involved in this operation, and Dr. Davina Patel has been dead for 6 months. The words hit Annabeth like a physical blow. She stared at the woman standing beside her, seeing her face clearly for the first time. The silver-streaked hair, the intelligent eyes, the bone structure that was familiar in a way that made Annabeth's stomach lurch with recognition. Who are you? Annabeth whispered. The woman who had called herself Davina smiled, and suddenly her entire appearance seemed different. Younger, harder, calculating in a way that made Annabeth's skin crawl. My name is Diana Carmichael, she said quietly. Vincent is my father. The sanctuary spun around Annabeth. Everything, every conversation, every moment of connection, every stirring of attraction, had been a performance. The woman she'd begun to trust, begun to care for, was Vincent's daughter. The real Dr. Patel died in a car accident 6 months ago, Diana continued, her voice now stripped of all warmth. I've been using her identity to track you down ever since. Agent Chen, Annabeth said desperately, are you hearing this? But there was no response from the phone. The line was dead. There is no Agent Chen, Diana said, pulling out a different phone. There is no FBI operation. There are no federal investigators coming to save you. Annabeth backed away, her mind reeling. The recordings of Vincent were very real. My father has been trying to clean up loose ends for years, and you were the biggest loose end of all. Diana's smile was sharp as a blade. But the recordings were made for my benefit, not the FBI's. I needed proof of what he'd done so I could finally take control of his empire. You're working against your own father. I'm working for myself. Vincent is 73 years old, Annabeth. His empire needs new leadership, and I've been positioning myself to provide it. Diana moved closer, her expression almost tender. You were the perfect catalyst. Your survival, your voice, your story, it's exactly what I needed to force him into a position where he'd reveal his crimes. Annabeth felt betrayal cutting deeper than any physical wound. Everything you said about guilt, about making amends, was calculated to gain your trust. Though I must admit, listening to you sing, there were moments when the performance felt real. What happens now? Now you disappear. Again. Permanently this time. Diana pulled out a syringe from her briefcase. But first, you're going to help me stage one final scene. The mentally ill homeless woman who held innocent people hostage before being tragically killed by police. Annabeth looked around the sanctuary, realizing how completely she'd been trapped. Jerome, Dolores, Father Miguel, all of them were still in the basement, unaware that their sanctuary had become a slaughterhouse. Why not just kill me quietly? Why this elaborate setup? Because I need the world to see Annabeth Williamson die. I need Vincent's reaction when he believes you're finally gone. I need him vulnerable, broken, ready to hand over control of everything he's built. Diana raised the syringe, and Annabeth saw her death reflected in the needle's gleam. You know what the beautiful irony is? Diana continued. Vincent really did love your music. He used to play your album when he thought no one was listening. Destroying you nearly broke his heart, but he did it anyway because business always came first. And you're just like him. I'm better than him. When I run Carmichael Media, I won't need to destroy artists to control them. I'll simply own them from the beginning. Annabeth's hand slowly moved toward her guitar case, where she kept the one thing that might save her, a small canister of pepper spray Jerome had insisted she carry. Diana, Annabeth said quietly, there's something you should know about your father. What? He recorded our entire conversation too. Diana's expression flickered with uncertainty. That's impossible. Is it? You think Vincent Carmichael, the man who's built an empire on information and control, wouldn't record a conversation with the daughter who's been plotting against him? Annabeth saw doubt creep into Diana's eyes and pressed her advantage. He knew you were using Dr. Patel's identity. He knew you were tracking me. He's been letting you think you were manipulating him while he manipulated you. You're lying. Am I? Check your phone. The one you've been using to coordinate with your people. Check the call log and see who's really been listening. Diana pulled out her phone with shaking hands, her eyes widening as she saw the active recording app that had been running without her knowledge. Hello, my dear daughter. Vincent's voice filled the sanctuary, coming from Diana's own phone. She stared at the device like it was a venomous snake. Did you really think I didn't know about your little rebellion? Your plan to use the famous Annabeth Williamson to destroy dear old Dad. Diana's face went white with terror and rage. Father, I can explain. You can't explain 15 years of planning to betray me, Diana. You can't explain using my own methods against me. You can't explain trying to steal my life's work. Annabeth saw her chance and lunged for her guitar case, her fingers closing around the pepper spray just as Diana spun back toward her. You did this, Diana snarled, advancing with the syringe. You poisoned him against me. I didn't have to. You destroyed yourself the moment you thought you could outsmart Vincent Carmichael. Diana raised the syringe, but Annabeth was ready. The pepper spray caught Diana full in the face, sending her stumbling backward with a scream of pain and fury. Annabeth, Vincent's voice continued from the phone, now almost gentle, you've served your purpose beautifully. My daughter is finished, my empire is secure, and you, well, you're about to discover that some prisons don't have walls. Annabeth looked at the phone, understanding with horrible clarity that she'd been a pawn in a game between father and daughter, that both had been using her for their own ends. What do you mean? I mean the building is surrounded by my real security team. I mean Diana's betrayal has been recorded and will be used to destroy her credibility if she ever tries to move against me again. I mean you're trapped in a church with a woman who now has nothing left to lose. Diana was recovering from the pepper spray, her eyes streaming but her rage intact. If I can't have the empire, then no one gets to walk away from this. She pulled out a device that looked like a garage door opener, her finger hovering over the red button. Explosive charges, she said, her voice hoarse from the chemical burn. Enough to level this building and make it look like a gas leak. Annabeth realized that Vincent hadn't just orchestrated her capture, he'd arranged for his own daughter's death as well, eliminating both threats to his power in one carefully planned explosion. Diana, he's going to kill you too. You know that, right? I know. But at least I'll take you with me. As Diana's finger moved toward the button, Annabeth understood that her 15-year journey from stardom to the streets was about to end exactly where it had begun, with Vincent Carmichael destroying everyone who threatened his control. But this time, she wouldn't die alone. And this time, the world would finally learn the truth about what happened to Annabeth Williamson. Even if it was written in the ashes of a burned church. Diana's finger trembled over the detonator button, tears from the pepper spray mixing with blood where she'd scratched at her burning eyes. The sanctuary felt smaller now, pressing in around Annabeth like a coffin lined with stained glass and broken promises. "You know what the worst part is?" Diana said, her voice raw and broken. "I actually started to care about you. When you were singing, when you talked about your family, for a few minutes, I forgot this was just business." Annabeth backed away slowly, her eyes fixed on the detonator. "Diana, your father is going to kill you regardless. Don't let him win by destroying innocent people." "Innocent people?" Diana laughed bitterly. "Annabeth, there are no innocent people in this story. You think the homeless people downstairs are here by accident? You think Father Miguel just happened to open his church to you?" The words hit Annabeth like ice water. "What are you talking about? Vincent has been positioning pieces on this chess board for months. Every person in this building is here because he wanted them here." Diana wiped blood from her eyes, her vision clearing enough to focus on Annabeth with terrifying intensity. "Jerome isn't just a Vietnam veteran, he's a former intelligence operative who Vincent blackmailed into watching you. Dolores isn't just a homeless teacher, she's Vincent's cousin, planted to gain your trust." Annabeth felt the last foundations of her reality crumbling. "You're lying. Father Miguel has been reporting your activities to Vincent for 6 months. The kind priest who offered you sanctuary. He's been paid $50,000 to monitor your movements and mental state." Each revelation struck Annabeth like a physical blow. The people she'd thought were her chosen family, the community that had sustained her through the darkest period of her life, all of it had been Vincent's manipulation. "Even your escape from Riverside wasn't real," Diana continued, her voice gaining strength as she watched Annabeth's world collapse. "Vincent allowed you to leave. He's been controlling your entire life for 15 years, making you think you were free while he pulled every string." Annabeth sank into a pew, her guitar slipping from nerveless fingers. "Why? Why not just kill me?" "Because you were more valuable alive. Vincent needed a way to test his network, to see who was loyal and who might betray him. He used you as a canary in a coal mine. Every person who tried to help you revealed themselves as a potential threat to his empire." The cruel genius of it made Annabeth physically ill. She'd thought she was surviving on her own strength, building genuine connections with people who cared about her. Instead, she'd been living in an elaborate prison where every relationship was a lie, every kindness calculated. "Dr. Patel, the real Dr. Patel, figured it out 6 months ago," Diana said. "She'd been investigating Vincent independently, trying to piece together what really happened to you. When she got too close to the truth, Vincent had her killed. And I took her identity to get close to you. It was supposed to be simple: gain your trust, record Vincent incriminating himself, then eliminate both of you and take control of the company." Diana's expression crumpled with something that might have been genuine regret. "But you weren't what I expected." Annabeth looked up at Diana, seeing the woman who'd manipulated her, betrayed her, destroyed her last illusions about human connection. But she also saw someone who'd been shaped by Vincent's cruelty just as surely as Annabeth had been. "What did you expect?" "I expected a broken woman. A victim so damaged by 15 years of psychological torture that she'd be easy to control." Diana sat in the pew across from Annabeth, the detonator still in her hand but no longer aimed like a weapon. "Instead, I found someone who'd survived hell and somehow kept her soul intact." "My soul isn't intact," Annabeth said quietly. "I haven't trusted anyone in 15 years. I've lived like an animal, scrounging for food and shelter, jumping at shadows. I've forgotten what it feels like to believe someone actually cares about me. But you kept singing. Even when no one was listening, even when people mocked you, you kept your voice alive. Diana's own voice was filled with something that sounded like wonder. Do you know what that means to someone who's never had anything real to hold on to? Annabeth studied Diana's face, seeing past the manipulation to something raw and desperate underneath. You're your father's daughter, but you're also his victim. He's never loved anyone or anything more than his empire. I've spent 35 years trying to earn something from him that he's not capable of giving. Diana held up the detonator. And now I'm about to die for the privilege of disappointing him one last time. Diana, we don't have to do this. We can walk away. No, we can't. Diana pulled out her phone, showing Annabeth the screen. Vincent's people are already moving. Look. The phone displayed security camera feeds from around the church. Armed men in tactical gear were taking positions, not to arrest anyone, but to ensure no one escaped alive. This was always how it was going to end, Diana said. Vincent just needed us to eliminate each other first so he could maintain plausible deniability. Annabeth watched the feeds, seeing the trap closing with military precision. Even if they somehow avoided the explosives, they'd never make it past Vincent's security team. What about the people downstairs? Jerome, Dolores, Father Miguel, whatever their real motivations, they don't deserve to die for Vincent's games. Don't they? Diana's voice turned cold again. They've been lying to you for months. They've been part of your psychological torture. Jerome watched you struggle through winter nights when he could have gotten you real help. Dolores listened to you cry about missing your family while she reported every word to Vincent. Annabeth closed her eyes, trying to process the scope of the betrayal. Everyone she'd trusted, everyone she'd cared about, everyone who'd seemed to care about her, all of it had been performance, manipulation, cruelty disguised as kindness. But the worst part, Diana continued, is that some of it was real. Jerome's war stories. True. His PTSD. Genuine. Dolores really did lose her teaching job, really was struggling financially when Vincent approached her. Father Miguel actually believes he's doing God's work, he just happens to think God wants him to help Vincent Carmichael. So they're victims too. They're collaborators who became victims when they stopped being useful. Diana's grip tightened on the detonator. Annabeth, there's something else you need to know. What? Your sister Melody. She's alive, but Vincent wasn't bluffing about being able to destroy her life. He has people at Georgia State, professors who owe him favors, administrators who accept his donations. One word from him, and she'll be accused of academic fraud that will follow her for the rest of her life. Annabeth felt her last hope crumbling. Even if we somehow survive this, he can still hurt her. Unless he's dead. Which brings us back to our current situation. Diana gestured around the sanctuary. Vincent has made sure that the only way to stop him is for both of us to die taking him with us. How does our death hurt Vincent? Because I've spent 3 years secretly recording every conversation I've had with him. Every order to destroy someone's life, every casual admission of murder, every detail about his network of corruption. Diana smiled grimly. Those recordings are set to be released automatically if I don't check in every 12 hours. My death becomes his destruction. Annabeth stared at Diana, understanding the final layer of the trap. But only if you die. If you walk away, the recordings stay hidden. Exactly. Vincent has engineered a situation where I have to choose between my life and justice for his victims. What about a third option? There is no third option. Vincent's people are closing in, the building is rigged with explosives, and we're trapped in here with nowhere to run. Diana's voice broke. Annabeth, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything I've done to you, everything my family has put you through. But this is the only way to make sure Vincent can't hurt anyone else." Annabeth looked around the sanctuary one last time, at the altar where she'd poured her heart out in song, at the windows that had caught the light during her performances, at the space that had felt like the closest thing to home she'd known in 15 years. All of it had been a lie. A carefully constructed stage for Vincent's final act of cruelty. "Diana," Annabeth said quietly, "if we're going to die, I want to know something real about you. Something that wasn't part of the performance." Diana was quiet for a long moment, tears streaming down her face from both the pepper spray and genuine emotion. "When I was 7 years old, I wanted to be a singer like you. I used to sneak into Vincent's office and listen to your album on repeat." Diana's voice was barely a whisper. "He caught me one day and told me that music was for weak people, that the Carmichael family controlled artists, we didn't become them. What happened to that little girl who wanted to sing? Vincent killed her. Slowly, over years, until all that was left was someone who could lie and manipulate and destroy people without feeling anything." Diana met Annabeth's eyes. "Until I heard you singing in that subway station. For just a moment, I remembered what it felt like to believe in something beautiful." Annabeth reached across the aisle and took Diana's hand, the same hand that held the detonator, the same hand that had been raised to inject her with poison. "Diana, what if there was a way to save your recordings without dying? What if we could get them to someone who would release them even if Vincent kills us?" "How?" Annabeth pulled out her phone, the burner she'd bought with busking money, the device that had connected her to the outside world when everyone around her was a lie. "Tyler. The kid who filmed me in the subway station. He's still monitoring the story, still engaged with what happens to me. If I can get him your recordings, Vincent will kill him too. Not if the recordings are already public. Not if Tyler posts them before Vincent realizes what's happening." Diana stared at Annabeth, hope and disbelief warring in her expression. "You trust a stranger with something this important?" "I'd trust someone who filmed me out of mockery but ended up giving me back my voice. Sometimes the people who hurt us accidentally become the ones who save us." For the first time since her true identity had been revealed, Diana smiled without calculation or cruelty. "You really still believe in people, don't you? Even after everything?" "I believe in the possibility that people can choose to do better. I believe that even someone raised by Vincent Carmichael might have something worth saving inside them." Annabeth began typing a message to Tyler, uploading Diana's recording files to a cloud server and sending him access codes. "Diana, I need you to know something. When I thought you were Dr. Patel, when I was starting to trust you, that felt real to me. Whatever your motivations were, you made me remember what it was like to hope for connection with another person. Annabeth. If we don't make it out of here, I want you to know that you gave me something beautiful in the middle of all this ugliness. You reminded me that I'm still capable of caring about someone." Diana squeezed Annabeth's hand, and for a moment they weren't victim and manipulator, predator and prey. They were two women who'd been broken by the same monster, finding a moment of genuine human connection in the shadow of death. But that moment shattered as Diana's phone buzzed with an incoming message from Vincent. "Time's up, my dear. Either push the button or I'll detonate the charges myself in 60 seconds. Diana looked at the detonator in her hand, then at Annabeth, then at the phone displaying Vincent's countdown timer. "Annabeth, even if Tyler releases the recordings, Vincent might survive the scandal. Rich, powerful men have a way of avoiding consequences. Then we make sure this time is different." "How?" Annabeth picked up her guitar, her fingers finding the chords to the song she'd been writing for 15 years, the song that told the complete truth about Vincent Carmichael's empire of cruelty. "We give them something they can't ignore. We give them a voice they can't silence." As Annabeth began to sing, her voice carrying through the sanctuary and out into the night where Vincent's men waited with their weapons. Diana understood what Annabeth was offering. Not just death, but the kind of death that would echo through history. The kind of death that would finally give Annabeth Williamson the platform she'd been denied for 15 years. But first, they had to survive the next 60 seconds. And Vincent Carmichael had never been known for his patience. Annabeth's voice soared through the sanctuary, carrying the song she'd written in the depths of Riverside Psychiatric Hospital, a melody born from electroshock therapy and isolation cells, lyrics forged in the fire of Vincent Carmichael's cruelty. As she sang, Diana's phone displayed Vincent's countdown, 37 seconds. Asterisk they tried to steal my voice, bury my name. Turn my truth into their game. But some songs can't be silenced. Some souls can't be claimed, asterisk. Annabeth, Diana whispered, her fingers still hovering over the detonator. Tyler just responded. The recordings are uploading to every major news network simultaneously. How long until they're live? 2 minutes. But Vincent's timer shows 30 seconds. Annabeth's fingers never stopped moving across the guitar strings, her voice growing stronger with each word. Through the stained glass windows, she could see muzzle flashes. Vincent's men were shooting out the streetlights, preparing for a final assault under cover of darkness. Then we hold the line for 2 minutes, Annabeth said between verses. We can't hold anything. The building is surrounded, rigged with explosives, and in 25 seconds Vincent is going to. Diana's words were cut off by the sound of helicopters overhead. Multiple aircraft, their searchlights sweeping the church grounds in coordinated patterns. What the hell? Diana stared at her phone as new messages flooded in, not from Vincent, but from news organizations, social media platforms, and people she didn't recognize. Annabeth kept singing, but her eyes were fixed on Diana's phone screen. Messages were scrolling too fast to read individually, but the pattern was clear, the story was exploding across every platform simultaneously. Tyler didn't just upload your recordings, Annabeth realized. He live-streamed my entire performance tonight. Millions of people just watched me sing in this sanctuary, watched you confess to being Vincent's daughter, watched everything. Diana's face went white. That means Vincent can't kill us quietly anymore. The whole world is watching. Vincent's voice crackled through Diana's phone, no longer smooth and controlled but ragged with panic. Diana, you stupid girl, do you realize what you've done? I've done what you taught me, Father. I've won. Diana's voice was steady now, fear replaced by something harder and more dangerous. The only question is whether you're going to murder your own daughter on live television. The countdown timer on Diana's phone stopped at 8 seconds. Through the windows, Annabeth could see Vincent's tactical team pulling back, their weapons lowered. The helicopters overhead weren't Vincent's, they were news crews, police units, and what looked like actual federal agents. Vincent, Annabeth called out, her voice carrying through the phone speaker, it's over. The whole world knows who you are now. The whole world knows who I've always been, Vincent replied, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. You think a few recordings and a viral video can destroy an empire I've spent 50 years building? I think the truth has a way of burning down empires, Annabeth said. Especially when it comes from the voices you tried to silence. Diana stood slowly, the detonator still in her hand but no longer pointed like a weapon. Father, I want you to know something. Every terrible thing you've ever done to maintain your power, I've recorded it all. Not just the Annabeth case, but everything. The other artists you've destroyed, the politicians you've bought, the journalists you've silenced. Diana. And I want you to know that I learned from the best. While you thought you were manipulating me into betraying Annabeth, I was manipulating you into confessing to everything. Diana's smile was sharp as her father's. Did you really think I wouldn't inherit your genius for psychological warfare? Annabeth watched the woman who had lied to her, betrayed her, nearly killed her, and realized that Diana had been playing a deeper game than any of them had understood. "You planned this," Annabeth said. "All of it. Finding me, gaining my trust, setting up the confrontation. You knew Vincent would try to eliminate both of us. I knew my father better than he knew himself. He's always been willing to sacrifice anyone to protect his empire, including his own daughter." Diana's voice carried 15 years of accumulated pain. "But I also knew that if I could get him to confess to everything on a live stream watched by millions of people, not even Vincent Carmichael could survive the exposure." "What about the explosives?" Diana held up the detonator, then carefully removed the batteries. "There are no explosives. There never were. Just another lie to make you believe we were trapped." Annabeth felt the sanctuary spinning around her. "So everyone downstairs, Jerome, Dolores, Father Miguel, are exactly who they said they were. Broken people who found something worth protecting in your voice." Diana's expression softened. "Annabeth, the conspiracy against you was real. Vincent really did destroy your life, really did have you committed, really did want you dead. But not everyone who helped you was part of his plan. How do I know what's real anymore? Because some things can't be faked." Diana gestured toward Annabeth's guitar. "Your voice is real. Your music is real. The way you've survived 15 years of hell and somehow kept your humanity intact, that's real." Annabeth's phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. She answered hesitantly. "Annabeth?" The voice was young, nervous, excited. "This is Tyler. Tyler Brennan. I'm the kid who filmed you in the subway." "Tyler? I'm outside the church right now with like 50 reporters and camera crews. The recordings you sent me, they're everywhere. Every news station, every social media platform, every streaming service. People are calling it the biggest music industry scandal in history." Annabeth looked at Diana, who was listening with an expression of wonder and disbelief. "Tyler, is it over? Is Vincent Carmichael just got arrested live on television. They're charging him with conspiracy, murder, fraud, racketeering, basically everything." Tyler's voice was breathless with excitement. "But Annabeth, that's not why I'm calling." "What do you mean?" "I mean there are record executives here. Real ones, legitimate ones. They want to talk to you about a recording contract. They want to give you back your career." Annabeth felt something she hadn't experienced in 15 years, the possibility of a future she actually wanted. "But more than that," Tyler continued, "there are people here who say they're your family. A young woman who says she's your sister Melody, and an older couple who claim to be your parents." Annabeth's legs gave out, and she sank into the pew. Her family. Her sister who was supposed to be in Georgia, her parents who she'd assumed had given up on her years ago. How did they? The viral video. When it started spreading, your sister saw it and recognized your voice immediately. She's been driving all night to get here. Annabeth was crying now, tears she'd been holding back for 15 years finally breaking free. Diana sat beside her, close enough to offer comfort but careful not to impose. "Annabeth," Diana said quietly, "there's something else you should know. About the people downstairs, they really were reporting to Vincent. But not about you." "What do you mean?" "They were reporting about me. Jerome, Dolores, Father Miguel, they all figured out that I wasn't really Dr. Patel. They've been protecting you from me for weeks." Annabeth stared at Diana, another layer of the truth settling into place. "When I showed up claiming to be Davina Patel, Jerome recognized me from photographs in Vincent's office. He'd worked security for my father years ago. Dolores had been one of Vincent's employees before she lost everything in his downsizing. Father Miguel had been taking Vincent's money, but only so he could use it to help the homeless community. So they were lying to protect me? They were lying to Vincent about what kind of person you were, what kind of threat you posed. Every report they sent made you sound broken, harmless, no danger to anyone. Diana's voice was filled with something that might have been admiration. They've been a family to you in every way that mattered, Annabeth. They just couldn't tell you because Vincent would have killed them if he'd known their real loyalties. Annabeth closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 15 years of paranoia and mistrust beginning to lift. Not everyone had been lying. Not everyone had been trying to hurt her. Diana, Annabeth said quietly, what happens to you now? I don't know. I've spent my entire life being Vincent Carmichael's daughter. I don't know who I am without that identity. You're someone who chose to do the right thing when it mattered most. You're someone who helped bring down one of the most powerful predators in the entertainment industry. Annabeth met Diana's eyes. You're someone who gave me back my voice. Annabeth, I lied to you. I manipulated you. I almost killed you. But you didn't. When it mattered, when you had to choose between your father's approval and doing what was right, you chose justice. Diana was quiet for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. I don't know how to be a good person. Vincent never taught me that. Then learn. It's never too late to become who you were meant to be. Annabeth's phone buzzed with another call, this time from a number she recognized as the FBI's public information line. Ms. Williamson? This is Agent Sarah Chen, Federal Bureau of Investigation. I apologize for the confusion earlier, there was some interference with our communication systems. Agent Chen. You're real. Very real. We've been investigating Vincent Carmichael for years, but we needed someone with inside access to his organization. Diana Carmichael contacted us 6 months ago and offered to cooperate. Annabeth looked at Diana with new understanding. You were working with the FBI the whole time. I was working with everyone I could find who wanted to stop Vincent. The FBI, investigative journalists, victims' rights organizations. Diana's voice was exhausted but relieved. Annabeth, I never meant for you to be hurt in this process. I just needed Vincent to believe I was still his loyal daughter while I gathered evidence. The real Dr. Patel is alive and well in federal protection. We faked her death to give Diana cover for assuming her identity. Agent Chen's voice was professional but warm. Ms. Williamson, we're going to need your testimony for the prosecution, but first, I think there are some people who'd like to see you. Annabeth stood slowly, Diana beside her, and walked toward the sanctuary doors. For the first time in 15 years, she wasn't walking toward an uncertain future alone. As they reached the doors, Annabeth turned to Diana one last time. What will you do now? I think I'd like to learn how to sing, Diana said quietly. You made me remember that little girl who used to sneak into Vincent's office to listen to your album. I'd like to teach you, Annabeth replied. If you're willing to learn from someone who spent 15 years singing to empty subway stations. I can't think of anyone I'd rather learn from. Annabeth pushed open the sanctuary doors, and for the first time since she was 23 years old, she stepped into a world where her voice mattered, where people were waiting to hear her story, where family meant more than DNA and love was stronger than fear. The impossible choice hadn't been between death and survival. It had been between remaining a victim of Vincent Carmichael's cruelty and becoming the voice that would ensure no other artist would suffer the same fate. Annabeth had chosen to sing. And the world had finally chosen to listen. The sanctuary doors opened to reveal a world transformed. Where Annabeth had expected darkness and danger, she found light, dozens of camera crews, their equipment creating a constellation of illumination that turned the church steps into a stage more magnificent than any she'd ever performed on. But none of the lights, none of the cameras, none of the shouting reporters mattered when she saw the young woman standing at the bottom of the steps. Melody was 25 now, tall and graceful with the same elegant bone structure Annabeth remembered, but her eyes held a depth of pain that made Annabeth's chest ache. Behind Melody stood two figures Annabeth thought she'd never see again, her parents, Robert and Grace Williamson, aged by grief but alive, present, real. Annabeth? Melody's voice carried across the chaos like a prayer. Is it really you? Annabeth descended the steps slowly, feeling each footfall like a step back through 15 years of separation. The crowd parted around them, cameras recording but somehow distant, as if the entire world had agreed to give this moment the reverence it deserved. Melody, Annabeth whispered, reaching out to touch her sister's face. You're so beautiful. You grew up. You were supposed to be dead. Melody's voice broke. We buried you. We had a funeral. Mama cried for 3 years. I know, baby girl. I'm so sorry. They fell into each other's arms, and Annabeth felt 15 years of survival instincts, the constant vigilance, the refusal to trust, the walls she built around her heart, crumble in the space of a heartbeat. Melody smelled like vanilla and medical textbooks, like hope and determination and all the dreams Annabeth had sacrificed to Vincent's cruelty. Annabeth. Her father's voice was gravelly with age and emotion. Robert Williamson had been a giant in her childhood memories, but now he seemed smaller, more fragile, worn down by years of believing his eldest daughter was dead. My baby girl. Annabeth reached for him without letting go of Melody, creating a circle of family that had been broken for 15 years. Her mother Grace joined them, tears streaming down a face that had been beautiful once and was beautiful still, marked now by loss but radiant with impossible joy. We never stopped looking, Grace whispered against Annabeth's hair. Even when the police said you were dead, even when everyone told us to move on, we never stopped believing you might come home. How did you find me? Tyler's video, Melody said, laughing through her tears. I was studying for my MCAT when my roommate showed me this crazy viral video of a homeless woman singing in the subway. The moment I heard your voice, I knew. I called Mama and Daddy, and we were in the car 20 minutes later. Annabeth looked at Tyler, who was standing awkwardly at the edge of the family reunion, his phone still recording but his expression caught between pride and disbelief at what his mockery had unleashed. Tyler, Annabeth called out. Come here. The teenager approached hesitantly, probably expecting to be yelled at for filming her without permission. Instead, Annabeth pulled him into the family circle. This young man saved my life, she announced to the gathered crowd. His video didn't just go viral, it brought me home. Tyler's face flushed red. I was just trying to be funny. I didn't know. You didn't know you were documenting a miracle, Grace said, squeezing Tyler's shoulder. Sometimes the most important things we do are the ones we don't plan. Behind them, Diana watched the reunion with an expression Annabeth couldn't quite read. When their eyes met, Annabeth saw longing, joy, and something that looked almost like grief. Diana, Annabeth said, extending her hand. Come meet my family. Diana shook her head. Annabeth, this is your moment. You don't need. I need the woman who helped me find my voice again to meet the people who gave me that voice in the first place. Diana approached slowly, and Annabeth felt the electricity between them, complicated by deception and manipulation, but grounded in something real that had grown in the spaces between lies. Mama, Daddy, Melody, Annabeth said, this is Diana. She's the reason Vincent can never hurt anyone again. Grace studied Diana with the intuitive intelligence that had made her such a perceptive mother. You're Vincent Carmichael's daughter. Yes, ma'am. And you chose to protect my daughter instead of your father. I chose to do what was right. Finally. Grace nodded slowly, then surprised everyone by pulling Diana into a fierce hug. Then your family too. The simple acceptance broke something open in Diana's chest. Annabeth watched tears stream down her face, not the calculated tears of manipulation, but the raw grief of someone who'd never experienced unconditional love. "Mrs. Williamson," Diana said through her tears, "I don't deserve. Child, none of us deserve the love we're given. That's what makes it grace." Agent Sarah Chin appeared at Annabeth's shoulder, her presence somehow both protective and respectful. "Ms. Williamson, I hate to interrupt, but there are some developments you should know about." "What kind of developments?" "Vincent Carmichael died 20 minutes ago." The words hit the gathered crowd like a thunderclap. Annabeth felt Diana's hand find hers, squeezing tight with shared shock and complicated grief. "How?" Diana asked. "Heart attack. He was in federal custody, being processed for arraignment, when he collapsed. The paramedics couldn't revive him." Annabeth looked at Diana, seeing the complex emotions playing across her face. Relief, grief, liberation, loss, all tangled together in a way that made Annabeth's heart ache for her. "Diana, I'm sorry," Annabeth said quietly. "Don't be. Vincent chose his path a long time ago. At least this way, he can't hurt anyone else." Agent Chin continued, "His death doesn't change anything about the investigation. We have enough evidence to prosecute his entire network, and the recordings Diana provided have already led to 17 arrests across the entertainment industry." "What about Riverside Psychiatric Hospital?" Annabeth asked. "Shut down permanently as of this morning. The patients are being transferred to legitimate facilities, and several staff members have been arrested for their role in the conspiracy." Annabeth felt a weight she'd carried for 15 years finally lift from her shoulders. The place that had been her hell was gone. No other artist would disappear into those walls. "There's something else," Agent Chin said. "The Attorney General wants to meet with you. They're creating a task force to investigate corruption in the entertainment industry, and they want you to head the victims' advocacy component." "Me? You're not just a survivor, Annabeth. You're proof that the system can't silence everyone. Your voice, literally and figuratively, is going to help rebuild an industry that's been poisoned by people like Vincent." Tyler stepped forward, his phone still recording. "Annabeth, can I ask you something for the video?" "Of course. What are you going to do now?" "I mean, you could have any record deal you want. Every label in the country is probably trying to figure out how to contact you." Annabeth looked around at the faces surrounding her, family, friends, strangers who'd become allies, a young man whose mockery had become salvation, and Diana, whose betrayal had become redemption. "I'm going to sing," she said simply. "But not for record labels or fame or money. I'm going to sing for the people who need to hear that survival is possible, that voices can't be silenced forever, that families can be rebuilt even after they've been shattered." "What about justice?" a reporter called out from the crowd. "Vincent Carmichael is dead, but his empire destroyed dozens of careers. What about the other victims?" Annabeth felt the familiar fire building in her chest, not rage this time, but determination. "Justice isn't about punishment," she said, her voice carrying across the crowd with the power that had once filled stadiums. "Justice is about making sure this never happens again. Justice is about creating a world where artists can tell their truth without fear." She turned to Diana. "And justice is about giving people the chance to become better than their worst moments." Diana smiled through her tears. "Annabeth, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have said earlier." "What?" "When I was planning all this, when I was manipulating you to get to Vincent, somewhere along the way, it stopped being about revenge." Diana's voice was barely audible above the crowd noise. "It started being about you. About protecting you, saving you, giving you back the life you deserved." Annabeth felt her breath catch. "Diana. I know it's complicated. I know I hurt you, lied to you, nearly destroyed you. But Annabeth, I love you. Not the idea of you, not what you represent, you. The woman who sang hope into the darkest places, who survived hell and somehow kept her soul intact. The confession hung between them like a bridge over an impossible chasm. Annabeth looked at Diana, beautiful, damaged, dangerous Diana who'd been shaped by Vincent's cruelty but had chosen love over revenge when it mattered most. I love you too, Annabeth said quietly. Which should be impossible, considering everything that's happened. But it's not impossible. No. It's the most real thing I've felt in 15 years. They kissed then, in front of the cameras and the crowd and the family that had thought Annabeth was dead. It was a kiss that tasted like survival and forgiveness, like second chances and the possibility that love could grow even in the ashes of betrayal. When they broke apart, Tyler was grinning behind his phone camera. That's going to get like 1 billion views, he said. Annabeth laughed, the first completely joyful sound she'd made since she was 23 years old. Tyler, I have a proposition for you. What? You want to be a filmmaker, right? Make documentaries. How did you know that? Lucky guess. How would you like to help me document what happens next? The rebuilding, the healing, the process of creating something beautiful from something broken? Tyler's eyes went wide. Are you serious? Dead serious. Someone needs to tell the whole story, not just the scandal part. Someone needs to show that healing is possible. Annabeth turned back to the crowd, her family beside her, Diana's hand in hers, Tyler's camera capturing every moment for a world that was finally ready to listen. Ladies and gentlemen, she called out, her voice carrying the power and presence that had been forged in pain and refined by love, my name is Annabeth Williamson. I've been gone for 15 years, but I'm home now. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, but Annabeth wasn't finished. And tomorrow, I start the work of making sure that no other artist, no other voice, ever gets silenced the way mine was. This isn't just my victory, it's victory for everyone who's ever been told they don't matter, everyone who's ever been pushed into the shadows, everyone who's ever been afraid to sing their truth. As the crowd's response grew louder, Annabeth realized that Vincent's final defeat wasn't his death or his arrest or the destruction of his empire. His final defeat was this moment, the voice he tried to silence standing in the light, surrounded by love, promising to use her platform to protect others from suffering the same fate. The girl who'd been broken in Riverside Psychiatric Hospital was gone. In her place stood a woman who would ensure that her survival meant something more than just personal healing. It meant hope for everyone still fighting to find their voice in a world that tried to silence them. And that was a victory that would echo long after the cameras stopped rolling and the reporters went home. It was the kind of victory that changed everything. Forever. 1 year later, Annabeth stood in the same subway station where Tyler had filmed her singing for Spare Change. But this time, she wasn't alone, wasn't desperate, wasn't invisible to the world rushing past. This time, she was surrounded by the warm glow of professional lighting equipment as Tyler directed his documentary crew, capturing the final scene of Finding Annabeth, A Voice Restored. The station had been transformed into an impromptu concert venue, filled with the faces of people whose lives had been touched by her story. Homeless individuals from St. Matthew's Church sat beside music industry executives who testified against Vincent's network. Former patients from Riverside Psychiatric Hospital shared space with FBI agents who'd worked the case. At the front of the crowd, her family beamed with pride while Diana sat beside them, no longer Vincent Carmichael's daughter but Annabeth's partner in every sense that mattered. Are you ready? Tyler asked, his confidence behind the camera light years from the mocking teenager who'd filmed her 15 months ago. Annabeth adjusted her guitar, not the battered instrument she'd carried through years of exile, but a beautiful acoustic guitar that had been a gift from Melody, inscribed with the words, "Your voice matters," in their mother's handwriting. I'm ready, she said, though her heart was racing with the familiar pre-performance energy that had once terrified her and now felt like coming home. But this performance wasn't about fame or record sales. The Annabeth Williamson Foundation for Silenced Artists was launching today, funded by the settlement from Vincent's estate and designed to provide legal protection, mental health support, and career assistance for artists facing industry retaliation. Ladies and gentlemen, Annabeth began, her voice carrying through the subway tunnel with the same power that had stopped commuters in their tracks. 15 months ago, I stood in this exact spot, singing for the spare change of strangers who saw me as nothing more than another broken soul. She looked at Tyler, who nodded encouragingly from behind his camera. I thought my story was ending in that tunnel. I thought my voice had been reduced to echoes in the dark. Annabeth's fingers found the opening chords of the song she'd written during her recovery, a melody that spoke of resurrection, redemption, and the unbreakable power of truth. But sometimes our endings are really beginnings. Sometimes the people who hurt us accidentally become the ones who save us. Her eyes found Tyler in the crowd, the young man whose mockery had become the catalyst for her salvation. Sometimes the families we've lost find their way back to us through the miracle of never giving up hope. She smiled at her parents and Melody, whose presence in her life had healed wounds she'd thought were permanent. And sometimes the people who seem like our enemies are really fellow prisoners, looking for their own way out of the darkness. Her gaze settled on Diana, whose transformation from manipulator to advocate had been as dramatic as Annabeth's own journey from victim to victor. This song is for everyone who's ever been told their voice doesn't matter, everyone who's ever been pushed into the shadows, everyone who's ever wondered if survival is enough or if they're meant for something more. Annabeth began to sing, and the subway tunnel filled with a sound that was both heartbreakingly familiar and completely transformed. This was still the voice that had once made stadiums weep, but now it carried the weight of authentic suffering and genuine hope. This was the voice of someone who'd been broken and rebuilt, who'd learned that healing wasn't about forgetting the past but about transforming it into something beautiful. I was lost in the dark, thought my song was done. Voice like broken glass, future like the sun. Gone behind the clouds of someone else's greed. But love planted flowers in the places I bleed. Now I'm rising up from the ashes of despair. Finding strength in truth, finding hope in prayer. Every note I sing is for the ones still lost. Every word I speak says love's worth the cost. In the crowd, Jerome wiped tears from his scarred face while Dolores held Father Miguel's hand, all three of them finally able to be honest about their role in protecting Annabeth during her darkest period. They'd become her chosen family, and their love had been real even when their circumstances had required deception. They tried to steal my voice, bury my name. Turn my truth into their twisted game. But some songs can't be silenced. Some souls can't be claimed. When love writes the music, hope breaks every chain. Dr. Harrison Webb's daughter sat in the front row, holding the medical files her father had preserved to expose the truth about Riverside. Beside her, Sarah Chen smiled through tears, thinking about her partner Michael Torres and how his death had ultimately led to Vincent's downfall. Justice had been slow, but it had been thorough. As Annabeth reached the bridge of her song, Diana stood and began to sing harmony, her voice untrained but pure, carrying the melody of someone who'd learned that it was never too late to become the person you were meant to be. Their voices blended perfectly, creating something more beautiful than either could achieve alone. For the broken and the lost. For the ones who paid the cost. For the voices in the dark. Love will heal what hate destroyed. Fill the places void has void. Every ending is a start. Tyler's cameras captured every moment, but he was no longer just documenting, he was witnessing. His film about Annabeth's story had already been accepted to Sundance and was being fast-tracked for theatrical release. But more importantly, it had inspired other survivors to come forward, creating a movement that was transforming how the entertainment industry treated vulnerable artists. When the song ended, the applause echoed through the subway tunnel like thunder. But Annabeth wasn't finished. "Today marks the official launch of the Annabeth Williamson Foundation," she announced, "but this isn't really about me anymore. This is about making sure that every artist who faces retaliation for telling their truth has somewhere to turn for help." She gestured to the diverse crowd surrounding her. "This is about creating a community where voices are protected, not silenced. Where creativity is celebrated, not exploited. Where the power belongs to the artists, not the people who profit from their pain." Melody stepped forward, now in her final year of medical school and preparing to specialize in trauma therapy for creative professionals. "My sister taught me that healing isn't just about surviving, it's about thriving in ways that honor both your scars and your strength." Robert and Grace Williamson joined their daughters, their faces radiant with pride and pain intermingled. They'd lost 15 years with Annabeth, and those years could never be recovered. But they'd also gained a deeper appreciation for the preciousness of family, the fragility of time, and the unbreakable bonds that survive even the worst trauma. "We want everyone to know," Grace said, her voice carrying the authority of a mother who'd never stopped believing, "that families can heal, even after they've been shattered. Love is stronger than loss, hope is stronger than despair, and truth is stronger than any lie ever told." Diana stepped beside Annabeth, their hands intertwining naturally. Their relationship wasn't simple. Love built on a foundation of deception and betrayal required constant work, daily choices to trust and forgive. But it was real, tested by fire and proven stronger than the circumstances that had brought them together. "I spent 35 years being Vincent Carmichael's daughter," Diana said to the crowd. "Now I'm learning what it means to be Annabeth's partner, the foundation's co-director, and most importantly, myself. Recovery isn't just for survivors, it's for anyone who wants to become better than their worst moments." Agent Sarah Chen stood at the edge of the crowd, watching justice manifest not as punishment but as protection. Vincent's network had been dismantled, 17 industry predators were serving federal prison sentences, and new legislation was being drafted to prevent similar conspiracies. But the real victory was this: survivors finding their voices, families reuniting, communities forming around shared healing. As the formal ceremony concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Annabeth found herself alone with Tyler in the subway tunnel where it all began. "So what's next?" Tyler asked, packing up his equipment with the efficiency of someone who'd found his calling. "Next, we keep singing. Keep telling stories. Keep making sure that no one else has to go through what we went through." Annabeth smiled, looking around the tunnel that had been her stage when she had nothing left to lose. "Tyler, do you remember what you said when you first filmed me here? That you were a crazy homeless lady who thought she could sing. And what do you think now?" Tyler was quiet for a moment, considering. "I think sometimes the people we dismiss as crazy are the ones brave enough to keep singing when the world stops listening. I think I was the crazy one for not hearing the truth in your voice. We were all crazy, in our own ways. Crazy with pain, crazy with loss, crazy with the desperate need to survive." Annabeth picked up her guitar case, the weight familiar and comforting. "But we were also crazy with hope. And that made all the difference." As they walked toward the exit, Annabeth caught sight of her reflection in the subway window, no longer the desperate woman who'd sung for spare change, but also not the naive young star who trusted the world to be fair. She was something new, something forged in darkness but choosing light, something broken but deliberately rebuilt. The subway platform was empty now except for the normal late-night commuters, people heading home from jobs and dinner dates and ordinary lives. Annabeth remembered when she'd envied them their normalcy, their invisibility, their freedom from being hunted. Now she understood that everyone was carrying something, everyone was singing some version of her song, the melody of survival, the harmony of hope, the rhythm of refusing to give up. 6 months later, Annabeth stood on the stage of Madison Square Garden, but this time she wasn't performing for fame or fortune. She was headlining the first annual Voices Rising benefit concert for the foundation, surrounded by artists who'd survived industry abuse and emerged stronger for it. The crowd was massive, but Annabeth's eyes found the people who mattered most: her family in the front row, Diana backstage managing logistics with military precision, Tyler filming from the wings for his follow-up documentary, and scattered throughout the audience, the faces of survivors who'd found their own voices through the foundation's support. "This song is dedicated to everyone who's ever been told they don't matter," Annabeth said into the microphone, her voice carrying to every corner of the arena. "You matter. Your voice matters. Your truth matters." As she began to sing the anthem that had become the foundation's rallying cry, 20,000 voices joined her, creating a sound that could heal the world, or at least the small corner of it where music lived and breathed and refused to be silenced. We are the voices they tried to destroy. We are the songs they couldn't enjoy. We are the truth they tried to hide. But love and music can't be denied. We rise from ashes, we rise from pain. We sing through sunshine, we sing through rain. No empire lasts when truth finds its voice. Standing together, we make the choice. To heal, to hope, to sing, to soar. To be what we were created for. To shine our light in the darkest places. To see the divine in forgotten faces. The song ended, but the impact rippled outward like stones thrown into still water. In the months that followed, the foundation would help dozens of artists escape abusive contracts, provide therapy for trauma survivors, and create safe spaces for voices that might otherwise be silenced. Annabeth's story had become bigger than her personal healing. It had become proof that survival was possible, that voices could be restored, that love could grow even in the aftermath of betrayal. But perhaps most importantly, it had become evidence that sometimes the people who hurt us accidentally become the ones who save us, and sometimes our greatest victories come not from avoiding pain but from transforming it into something beautiful that helps heal the world. Annabeth Williamson had found her way home, not to the place she'd been before Vincent destroyed her life, but to the place she was always meant to be, using her voice to light the way for others still lost in the darkness. And in that truth, in that purpose, in that love that had grown from ashes, she had found something more valuable than fame or fortune. She had found peace. What did this story teach you about the power of finding your voice again after life tries to silence you? About how love can grow even from betrayal, and how survival can become a platform for healing others. Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories that will change how you see the world. Annabeth's journey from broken silence to healing anthem reminds us that our lowest moments often contain the seeds of our greatest triumphs. Sometimes the people who mock us become our unexpected allies. Sometimes the families we've lost find their way back to us through the miracle of hope. And sometimes the voices that seem silenced forever are just waiting for the right moment to rise and sing their truth to a world ready to listen. In a culture that often discards people when they're no longer useful, Annabeth's story stands as testament to the unbreakable power of the human spirit and the healing magic of authentic love. Her voice, forged in the fires of betrayal and refined by the choice to trust again, echoes the song every survivor knows: we are more than what was done to us, stronger than what tried to break us, and capable of transforming our pain into power that lights the way for others. This is the music that matters most, not the melodies that chase fame, but the harmonies that heal hearts and the rhythms that restore hope to a world that sometimes forgets how to sing.